Kansas City, Missouri, a city known for three things: barbecue, the Kansas City Chiefs, and trains. On July 23rd, my birthday of 2025, I made a trip up to Kansas City to meet up with some family rail fans and see what I could catch. I caught a lot of trains, over 50 to be exact, with tons of good action, so let's get right into it. Immediately upon getting to Santa Fe Junction, I was greeted by the passing of a northbound frac sand train heading from Argentine Yard to Murray Yard with a Dash 9 on the point. Next up was a northbound empty coal train on the Fort Scott. The next train to come by would be the ZLPK-WSP on the flyover. Following close behind it on the lower level was BNSF's last active salad shooter, the Z-STO-WSP. We were then completely jump scared by this westbound KCT light power move with a single Bumblebee Jeep for power. Shortly after that cleared, an eastbound Union Pacific loaded KCPL coal train headed to the Kansas City Power and Light Power Plant on the east side of town passed through Santa Fe Junction. As the UP coal train was still passing, an eastbound BNSF Z with some foreign power trailing passed by on the flyover. The action picked up a bit as a grain train approached while the other two trains were still passing. As the grain train continued on its way, the Kansas City to Tulsa train exited Argentine Yard and began making its way towards the Fort Scott sub. There was then another jump scare as the SLPC LHG with an H1 made its way on the flyover with absolutely nobody noticing until it was already right in front of us. Next would be this westbound ethanol train exiting Murray Yard. The next train would be the HKCK Lynn heading to Murray with a GP39-2R with a GP30 car body trailing third and a pair of SD70 Aces. While the KCK loon was still passing, this single BNSF Jeep came Longhood forward up the Fort Scott subdivision to go work the steel mill that's next to Santa Fe Junction. After the local passed, there was a meet between an eastbound intermodal and a westbound ethanol, both having H1-9s trailing. While the ethanol was still passing, this grain train with an SD70 Ace Duo came by. Next up was this eastbound intermodal. The next train to pass would be a westbound UP intermodal being led by one of the experimental new scheme GEVOs. we would see one more train before heading to our lunch reservation at Jack Stack Barbecue at the Freight House by Union Station, which was a westbound BNSF intermodal with an H1 as one of the mid-DPUs. Unfortunately, I was only able to take stills of this train as I was resting in the car trying to relieve my heat-induced nausea. On our way to Jack Stack, we stopped by the Docks Caboose area because the Kansas City West Bottoms Railroad was operating. The only movement we got was them moving their GMD-1 across the parking lot, but I'll take it. Once we arrived at Jack Stack, this UP empty coal train spawned out of thin air. The next train to come by will be this eastbound BNSF Manifest. The next train to pass would be a westbound BNSF Manifest with a Ferromex Ace trailing third. The next train would probably be the worst fumble of the day, a westbound UP Manifest with none other than an SD70M leading. And of course, the one UP train that passes while I'm at Jack Stack and the parking lot blocks the shot has an SD70M leader. And as if things couldn't get any worse, then this happened. After finishing our lunch at Jack Stack, we headed up onto the Freight House Bridge to catch a couple of trains. This is where I was attacked by the yappers, aka small children yapping in my shot and ruining the video. However, there were some funny moments. Also, we couldn't really go back to Santa Fe Junction yet because everyone wanted to see the KCT Sheffield job, which had already passed Santa Fe Junction and had stopped just east of the virtual railfan camera, so we didn't really have a choice but to stay here and wait for it. The next train to pass after the River Runner was the ZWSP LPK with a single H2 GEVO for power. Following closely behind the Z was another manifest with average power. Next up was the KCT Sheffield job.
Huh?
Yes, you heard that correctly, and no, this is not edited in. Some random kid from the Freight House Bridge exclaimed that there were 2 Santa Fe's on the Sheffield job. What? Every Watco corporate unit is Santa Fe? Since when? Well, anyways, let's get on with the video. These are Watco units, not Santa Fe, if you're watching this, kid from the Freight House Bridge. As you may have noticed, there was a westbound BNSF train lined as the KCT went by. We couldn't go back to Santa Fe Junction just yet, as we would miss this westbound. And that was a good choice, as this westbound had a really neat goodie on it. Yep, a BNSF B40-8W rebuild. Seeing one of these east of California is insanely rare. I can't even remember the last time I saw a B40 to any capacity, well except Galveston. So, it's a good thing we didn't leave Union Station. After catching that, we returned to Santa Fe Junction, where I was notified that the BN Supercab GP50L that I had seen in Tulsa just a few days earlier was at Lenexa and was on the move. So, we anticipated it, as we were told that it was the Tulsa to Kansas City train. First, this UP light power move of a Jeep and an SD40N went by, headed back to Armourdale from Argentine. What is up, guys? Today I'm at Santa Fe Junction. Today is my birthday, and we got H toll kick lined through, and it's got a consist made up entirely of locomotives I saw when I was at Tulsa this past weekend, with a GEVO in the lead, an A second, GP60M third, and the BN Supercab GP50L is trailing fourth. I did not expect to see this train today. I expected it to take the Olathe connector, but, well, here we are. Anyways, yeah, that's all I really have to say. Train cool. Today's been cool. I saw 2 KCT trains and a ton of H1s and a B40 too, so yay. Anyways, it's here. At this point, you're probably thinking what I'm thinking. Where on earth did that Supercab go? Well, as it would turn out, this was not the train I was looking for. This was the Memphis to Kansas City train, not the Tulsa to Kansas City train. After breathing a sigh of relief, I continued back to meet up with my family and wait for the end of the train to pass. Even though this wasn't the train with the Supercab, this train did still have one surprise in store for me. Yep, a BNSF H2 SD70MAC. Seeing this was awesome, seeing as BNSF has barely any SD70MACs in service at all, and most of them are on coal drags. This one, however, found its way onto a manifest. This was really neat to see, and I'm glad I was able to make it down in time to see it. Two BNSF unit trains would pass before the Supercab would finally show up. Just kidding, there would be 2 more jump scares before the Supercab came. Then it was finally time for the grand show of the Supercab. However, things wouldn't go to plan.
Oh my god. Oh, hell no.
Yep, the train with the Supercab wasn't Toll Kick. It was actually Toll Lin. After this, I rushed my way to the 12th Street Viaduct in hopes that maybe they would slow down and I'd be able to catch them again. And well, this happened.
Woo! Yeah, baby! That's what I've been waiting for. That's what it's all about. Woo!
Yep, I was able to successfully beat the toll into the 12th Street Viaduct and get better shots of the Supercab and the GP50M. However, the other railfans at Santa Fe Junction weren't as fortunate as I was. Press F in the comments to pay your respects to them. When I returned to Santa Fe Junction, there was an intermodal passing on the flyover, and a KCT train spawned out of nowhere, and I fumbled a CSX leader. The next train was an empty UP DDG train being led by a single NS AC44 C6M. Before I left Santa Fe Junction to go look for a DM&E SD40 to check out Argentine Yard, 2 more BNSF trains came by. On my way to Neff, I drove past this old scheme leader on an ethanol train. Now at Argentine, we see a plethora of interesting locomotives. First is this Montana Rail Inc. SD40 duo. Supposedly these are here for PTC installation. Regardless, it's cool to see a duo of these out here in Kansas, as they're very far from home. Sitting next to the Montana Rail Links is a fake bonnet, and I've actually seen this specific fake bonnet before. Next to all of those is one of BNSF's 3 Frankenstein-944 CWs. These are all H2H1s. This one here is 4331. It's here likely to get a new turbo after that turbo burn. I've been looking to see one of these for a while, as I've seen one before, but I fumbled it, so it's nice to get a shot of one of these up close. Now on the bridge, we see more interesting locomotives. The first being an H2 SD70MAC, the same one we saw on Memkick, running light with a couple of other motors, as well as the Galkix power set in the background with the B40 we saw at Union Station. Next, we see BNSF 1935, which somehow managed to follow me all the way to Kansas City. Man, I just can't get away from this thing. We also see a set of power with BNSF 7777, the ES44 DC that apparently got banned from California, and a KCSM Grey Ghost AC44. Finally, to end off the trip, we spot a plethora of Dash 9s at the shops with a couple of H1s in the mix. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe for more train videos just like this. See you guys in the next one. Hopefully it's as good as this one was.